Who has never heard about Eltoo? Yeah, it's my pet project, and I'm pretty proud of it. So I will try to keep this short. So I was told you all have seen my presentation about the evolution of update protocols. So I will probably go pretty quickly, but I would still want to give everybody the opportunity to ask questions if they had any. So what's L2? We've seen this yesterday already, right? Update mechanisms basically are some people meet, they lock in their on-chain state, and then they go off and negotiate off-chain about what to do with this state. They can renegotiate over and over and over again, and the update protocol makes sure that all of the invalidated states are not applicable anymore. The Lightning penalty mechanism does this by penalizing who is misbehaving, and duplex micropayment channels and L2 do that by basically overriding the effects that you were trying to get to by misbehaving. Okay, so L2, just a quick notation. I represent outputs as circles and transactions as squares. This is called a funding transaction. It basically takes some funds from the green user, let's call her Alice, and creates a multisig output that is controlled by both Alice and Bob, Bob being the blue guy. And from there on, basically all the actions that, all the changes to the state of this output need to be negotiated between the two. What we do in L2 is basically we attach to this output, we attach a settlement transaction, call her settlement 0, that reflects the initial state. So we could actually drop this one, and then it basically goes, okay, Alice creates a channel, and we settle the channel, and Alice gets her 5 bitcoins back. This time lock, which I represent with this clock here, basically ensures that during this timeout, we can actually go in and create an update. And if we do that, we create this update that basically ratchets this output forward and creates a new place to attach a new settlement 0, that reflects the new state. So in this case, we have transferred 1 Bitcoin from Alice to Bob, and this guy basically becomes double spent, and we can forget about this. I'm actually currently replaying this on-chain, but we can actually lift this off-chain quite easily later on. So we can repeat this over and over again, and this is basically already the entire mechanism. So when we want to create a new update, we double spend this output. This becomes invalid. It will never ever be able to reach the blockchain anymore. Update 2 ratchets this forward and opens up a point where we can attach settlement 2, and we can do that however many times we want. Yes.
For your updates, when you say you ratchet it forward, are you saying what's that transaction like update 1? Is that spinning to a new two multisig?
Exactly. So this is the multisig that is shared by Alice and Bob, containing those 5 bitcoins. And now we take this update transaction, we spend this output, and create a new output that again contains 5 bitcoins owned by Alice and Bob. The only difference being is what we can attach to it. So we can, to this one, we can attach settlement 0, but not settlement 1. The other way around. We can attach settlement 1 and not settlement 0. And the other thing that is particular is that from this one we can attach update 1, but not update 2, not update 1. Always weird to go backwards. So we've just played this game on the blockchain, right? We've done this on the blockchain, and it's really bad because every time we do an update, we actually create an on-chain transaction, which is probably not what we wanted because we pay fees every time, right? And we wait for confirmations every single time. We wouldn't have to wait for confirmations because these timeouts are chosen in such a way that this always gets precedence over this. So we can be sure that if both of these are out there, settlement 0 will not confirm because settlement update 1 has priority. So now yep.
So the timeouts and settlement, what happens if you, no, never mind. Just thinking if that timeout expires and you haven't broadcast update 1, then you can just broadcast settle 0.
Yes.
So what if you have a channel that doesn't have like a lot of action on it?
So in the Unchain case where we start this timeout right away with the creation of the funding output, in that case, yes, this has a limited lifetime of basically anything you feel comfortable with waiting for this timeout to approach timeout. So if this is 1 week, then probably after 6 days you should broadcast this. With the actual construction of Eltoo, we can introduce a trigger transaction in between here that basically is just an update and has no settlement. And in this case, this will stay there, and only when we broadcast the trigger transaction will the timeout start ticking. So that's how we can make the limited time life or lifetime into an indefinite time lifetime. Gosh, today is really the flip around.
To just have an update 1 transaction, I mean to give an update 1 transaction, and after that to broadcast the funding output on chain.
So the trigger transaction is actually identical to update 1 if we don't have a settlement 0. That's exactly the idea, yes. So now we have this really huge on-chain footprint, which is kind of really bad. So we lift off this protocol and keep all of these transactions that don't have a lock on it, we keep them in memory. So what we do is basically we want to have update 3 be able to attach to settlement, right? But we can't really do that because, well, update 1 might be out there, and we do have no way of attaching update 3 to update 1 and update and the funding output. So what we proposed, and jury's still out whether people actually want this in Bitcoin, is to have a new SIG hash flag. And SIG hash flags you probably learned about last week, right? Who doesn't know what SIG hash flags do? Excellent. Okay. So SIG hash no input would basically take a transaction and blank out the reference to what output it is spending. So what this does is basically we remove the direct commitment to what funds we are spending, and we make it rewritable. So I can take update 3 and rewrite it to point to the funding output, for example. Basically, we skip update 1 and update 2 and go directly to update 3 by having this pointer redirected here. The signature is still valid because, well, we blank before we signed and we blank before verifying the signature. So we no longer commit to the input that we are spending. And we have this situation where we have now update 3 can be attached to funding transaction. It can be attached to the output of update 1, and it can also be attached to update 2. So let's see. So we are in this case here, right? Where Bob has 3 Bitcoins and Alice has 2 Bitcoins. I'm Alice. I would like to settle this one, or even better, this one, right? So I will send update 1 because that initiates the close with the desired effect that I have, right? So Bob comes in and sees, hey, Alice is cheating here. She's trying to get here. So Bob basically takes update 2. Let's say update 3 has more for him. So update 3 and rewrites it internally to point to update 1. So update 1 is getting confirmed because Alice was hoping to get this outcome, but Bob has now attached it, has ratcheted this whole thing forward and double spent settlement 1. So by having this forward motion towards the latest state that we agreed upon, we can ensure that any old effect can be overridden by a later state. what that means for us is basically that an honest player should always be able to react to anything that happens, whether it's just the funding output or somebody published update N or update 0 or whatever, by holding on to the last update and the last settlement, I can always react to whatever happens on chain.
On the disagreement case, isn't this costlier than, isn't this in the worst case where you may have multiple update broadcasts on chain?
Mm-hmm.
It's worse than the current way with revocation.
Absolutely.
On the
with Lightning, the close of a channel is, or the unilateral close of a channel is always a two-step process, right? We publish the commitment and we sweep the funds, and it ends there. With L2, it might happen that we replay update 1, update 2, update 3, and then go on and on and on, because it's always the other guy whose situation was better, right? They aren't. So that's a really neat trick that Rusty found out, is basically that these are single input and single output transactions, right? So we can sign them using Zcash single, which means that we can attach, after the fact, we can attach a new input and a new output, and that way we pay fees. You always have to pay the fees.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So if all of this were free, sure, we could replay all of the states, but it is likely that we've just done like 10 steps, and I get bored because I'm paying fees and I'm not getting the effect I want. I just jump to the last state and I'm done. I want this settled. I'm not going to pay more fees. And that's how we penalize misbehavior in the network. But it's not penalizing in a way that is as deadly as in Lightning penalty, where all of your funds are lost. It's I often compare it to a death by 1,000 cuts compared to a death by decapitation. And trust me, I want 1,000 cuts. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's something that took us quite a while to figure out, but we can have a way that the update 2 is only touchable to anything that has a lower state number. And the way we do it is each of these have a CLTV operation as their first thing in them, and this guy gets a lock time that is somewhere in the past, such that we are not actually having a lock time, but we can still compare it with the current state number. So what this guy basically does when executing the script is pull the lock time of the previous one, compare it with my own state number. That's not true. I'm pulling my own lock time, and I'm comparing it to the state number that is already on the stack from the previous one. And only if that lock time is larger than the state number that was pushed on the stack by the previous one, only then this will be valid. And the reason we use lock times in the past is because we don't actually want a lock time. We just want to have this comparison between two numbers. Lock times in the past are immediately valid. So yes. Well, and timestamps. Yeah. So we have a range of so the semantics of the lock time switch over from being block heights to timestamps at a block height of 5 million. So we have a range between 5 million and the current Unix timestamp, which is about a billion there's 500 million. 500. Yeah, we have about 1 billion updates we can perform with this mechanism, with all lock times being in the past, and our range grows with time, so that's good. But 1 billion is pretty much more than any channel has ever done. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a relative time lock, such that only when this output is being created, then this timeout starts to tick, and we have absolute time locks to ensure that we don't attach update 1 to update 3. That's the entire trick. So the issue with having the state number in the input script is that the input script is not committed to in the signature. So I could basically go ahead and rewrite my or create an input script with any state number that is going to be higher than whatever I am trying to replace, and the lock time is committed to in a signature. Yeah, that was quite a headache. It's I'm not sure Russell O'Connor would call it covenants. He usually laughs at my attempts to create covenants, but yeah, the whole sick hash no input discussion has started and is a never-ending bike shed. I'm trying to stay out of it as much as possible. I just want my fun tools, and I don't care about the actual implementation. But yeah, people like to theorize about how to make it safer. Yes.
Reuse the index from the last one, right? Like the CLTV value, because now you.
So as soon as we touch the blockchain, we can reset the whole state. There is no need for us to carry over state from one instance of this protocol to the next one. And so if I eventually go and use settlement 1, then I can use this output again to create a new instance of this. But since anything that is built on top of this here can ever be attached to anything here because that's already settled, I don't have to care about that anymore. Plus, in a new instance here, we'd be using new keys. So one of the downsides of sick hash no input is that it actually makes replay possible, and it makes so I can take any transaction that sort of fits that has an input that fits some output there on the blockchain. I can attach to that basically. So I call this binding through script compatibility instead of binding through explicit commitment to an output you're spending. It gets us a lot of flexibility. It actually enables all of this, but it comes at the cost that it might be dangerous to use. And some of the proposals on the mailing list are going towards just calling it sick hash no input _ dangerous, which I find funny, but I'm totally fine with it.
How would you replay it? So you replay.
So let's say your wallet basically creates all signatures with sick hash no input, and you have 2 outputs that are 5 Bitcoin each. Now you want to send me 5 Bitcoins. You create a transaction using that, right? Oh, and the 5 Bitcoins also are on the same address, basically. So I get my 5 Bitcoins using your one output, but I can now take this transaction, rewrite it, and attach it to the other output as well. So all of a sudden, I got 10 Bitcoins, whereas you only want to send me 5. So that's how we replay in this case. There's a couple of safeguards that we try to protect, that we try to use here. Is basically if you switch public keys or addresses that you use, then this binding through script compatibility is broken. So I cannot take any of the other funds that do not have the same address or script. And the other safeguard is that we commit to the value of this. So all of these are always 5 Bitcoins, and we actually still commit to the output value that you're trying to spend. So if you have a 10 and a 5 output and you spend the 5 to me, then I cannot rebind it to the 10. That's simply because I could not come up with a good reason for making a rebinding that doesn't change the transaction, and all of a sudden the fee changes. Because, well, the outputs still have like 5 Bitcoins, but you're now spending 10, so these 5 now become fee. Kind of weird. Yeah. Yes. So they should not use Zcash no input. It's a very dangerous tool, but it's a very targeted tool that you should not use if you don't need to. So all of these discussions revolve around that. So I have like 2 more slides. Basically, it's kind of simple compared to the sort of I have this information, you have this information, and we can never share that information. It's completely symmetric. Everybody has the same information. There is no toxic information that might lead to you losing funds. We have no penalty as such. We only have a slight cost if you ever publish an old version, which actually enables backups again. Yes. Mm-hmm. So the downside of introducing penalties at a higher level, and trust me, I tried because penalty comes up often. People like to penalize people, by the way. I mean, if you ever want to penalize somebody for misbehaving, you have to reintroduce this symmetry in state. So there must be something by which I can identify that you were the one that misbehaved. And so this is sort of mixed into this whole Lightning penalty mechanism, where we actually have different information, but the power of Eltoo comes from all of this state being completely symmetric, and there is no privileged information that I should know and you shouldn't, because so I tried reintroducing penalties at a higher level. I have not found a nice way to do so, and so I usually just go with the excuse that fees are punishment enough.
I mean, maybe I got on the settlement transaction, because you have 2 outputs on the settlement transaction, and you add a penalty pass in each of the output stream.
Oh, we can reintroduce symmetries at the settlement step. That's true, yeah. So we can have 2 settlement transactions, one for you, one for me.
But you just want to have something like O1, just to keep the piece of data and not a pre-image for each update, right?
So we do have a construction with a shard chain. We can have revocation secrets that we can generate at will, basically. Yeah. So it also has a cleaner separation of layers, and what I'm excited about is besides being able to put that back into Lightning, we can actually create multi-party channels where we, as a whole room, for example, manage a set of funds, and we can move them freely between any of us without having to open channels or have multi-hops between us. It's just a pool of funds that we can rearrange however we want. So, and then we go into channel factories and all of that stuff, but I'll talk about more on that on Thursday. Disadvantage is, of course, hey, no penalty. And we need a change in the Bitcoin protocol, which has proven to be a bit more difficult than I anticipated. But that's always the case. I spent my whole PhD basically proposing stuff and nobody ever using it. So we talked about the proposals and at CoreDev. There's 2 or 3 variants of it. One is let me just go there. So this is the bit. Actually have a slide for this. So at CoreDev we discussed the different variants that we could have, and so one variant is that we add an additional signature to to a script using Zcash no input, such that we call the chaperone signature, and the idea is that your transaction is only valid if that transaction also has a non-Zcash no input signature. That way, we basically, if we're participants in an off-chain contract, we would basically generate a private key and we'd share it among ourselves. Everybody has a copy. So we can sign off on rebound versions, but nobody else can. So that's a guard against third-party malleability. The argument for it is, of course, a third-party malleability is not desired. Might be weird if somebody is able to rewrite transactions that you weren't aware was possible. The argument against it is saying that okay, it's bigger, it's more costly. We need to add an additional pub key. We need to add an additional checksig operation, and we need to add an additional signature. But also, we don't want to encourage people to use Zcash no input unless they need this flexibility. So there's sort of a difference between hand-holding all the way, or basically giving fair warning and then let people touch the hot plate and learn on their own. I'm more in the second camp. And the other variant is that we should use a different SegWit script version for it, such that one that isn't serializable in Bec32, so that even if you wanted to only ever use Zcash no input, you couldn't actually create an address to which to send. So in all of these constructions, we're always working directly with scripts, and we're not using addresses in any of this. So by making a Zcash no input destination unaddressable, we basically make it so that people couldn't accidentally send money there. And so that's the second thing. And the third variant is changing the name to _dangerous, which I like a lot. And we should do that. So yes, so there's an argument for fungibility that has to be made. It's trading off what you care most about. Is it about people using wallets that are badly written, or is it about you not being able to differentiate outputs from one another? So you would exactly in a unilateral close you would be able to tell that there was a unilateral close. In a non-unilateral close, you wouldn't in either case. So that's sort of okay. The bad case can be detectable. There's little we can do about that. Yes. Yes. It's. I mean, so the feeling that I got was that most people actually want this functionality because people are really excited about building stuff on top. Russell O'Connor is coming up with new interesting covenants that we could do, and everybody's telling him not to, but So the flexibility we gain is from what I feel is being seen as a net positive, and at least from the people that were present and discussing there, nobody had strong feelings for any of the encumbered versions. So we might eventually get it, maybe, please. Yeah. Oh yeah. So that's true. There is an alternative proposal which basically takes this and mixes up a bit the different variants. So this does not commit to the previous script because the script actually changes over time, right? We have the state number that we compare with the lock time, and so we can't commit to the script. And there's the other variant that is so this is being called check sig any prev out any script. And so the other variant is just check sig any prev out, but that still commits to the script. So these are two variants that are being proposed by AJ. Yes, that is a competing proposal, but it sort of also is. It gets me my functionality, so I'm happy. Yes. Yeah. I mean, any prev out is actually a better name for this. So probably we should use that. Both require a bump of the SegWit script version, yes, because we are redefining a new SIG hash, and that's by that unknown SIG hashes are an immediate failure if you don't understand them. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So the point of this stacking multicolored cake I show at the beginning is basically to show that these are distinct layers that we can replace individually. We don't have to break compatibility with the rest of the network. So this is just our update mechanism. So if the two of us agree to use Eltoo instead of the Lightning penalty mechanism, anything that we can basically just start using it. Anything that is multi-hop, that goes beyond our own scope, the scope of our channel, namely HTLCs and the onion, those remain identical. So the update mechanism is really just a way for us to negotiate adding and removing outputs to the settlement transaction, and what those outputs then are, whether they're HTLCs or whether they're additional channels, maybe. That's all in that's all for upper layers, and this clean separation of layers actually enables us to swap out individual parts. And we would indeed signal our availability of Eltoo in feature bits, both in the init and potentially in the node announcement, such that if I only implement Eltoo, I could selectively connect to peers that actually support Eltoo as well. Absolutely, yes. So they're by upgrading to, well, by implementing Eltoo and using it just between the two of us. Upgrades is a bad word in Bitcoin, by the way. By deciding to use Eltoo on individual hops, we still maintain the ability to have multi-hop payments stay identical, and we don't break compatibility on those layers at all. Mm-hmm. They are being discussed. I didn't add them to the BIP itself because BIPs are sort of static, and I didn't want to trace all the different proposals because there have been quite a few by now. But I might write an update and sort of, or add a discussion page where I summarize the different pros and cons of individual proposals. I should also mention, while we had a meeting in November in Adelaide with quite a few of us here, we laid out the roadmap for the version 1.1 spec, and Eltoo was purposefully not added to that roadmap because we don't have a good estimate of when this, if this is going to happen and when. And we didn't want to hold up version 1.1 of the specification for something that might take a few months. So this is really the far future of Lightning, and I'm under no illusion that this is going to happen this year or anytime soon. But it would be cool. Okay, so that's me. If you have any questions about Eltoo, I will be around, and I will point out any point where Eltoo is more flexible and more usable and whatever, until somebody tells me to shut up. So thank you. So far, nobody has told me to shut up. That's a first.